why would you use DQMH? So any takers? Why would you use DQMH?
Because you asked me to try it. Well, I can tell my quick story about why I would use it. I was working for a company that was doing more system integration stuff, so I never really had the opportunity to try it when Fab came out with it. And she kept saying, "Got to look at it. Got to look at it." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. I'll get to it." And then I changed to the job where I'm at now, and one of the things I wanted was an architecture. And I'm like, well, I can roll my own and I can start from scratch. But I'm like, I'm going to check out DQMH because Fab kept saying, you got to check it out. So I finally convinced myself and emailed her and said, all right, I'm going to take a look at it. And, here it is 3 years later, we're still using it. And it's just become such a flexible tool. So why do I use it? Partly because if we have somebody new, like an intern or somebody new to LabVIEW, it's a little easier to kind of show the concepts than it would be if I was using Actor Framework, because it's based off QMH. Mm-hmm. So it gives me that ability, but then at the same time, I can do any advanced stuff that I want and still use the same framework, and have the very flexible functionality for what I'm using. And what I started with 3 years ago was completely different than what we're using today. And we're still using DQMH. It's just, I've done different spins to it and I'm taking it, to different levels and trying different things. And it just it's been flexible. So why should I roll my own when if I have a problem or something breaks, which hasn't happened, but if it were, I just email Fab and say, hey, this doesn't work right.
Yeah. Well, and you have had some feedback for improvement. I think one of the feature requests that you already implemented. I don't remember which one was it, but validate all.
Yeah, validate all. Yeah, so when you have all these modules, you can validate all. That was one of them. Yeah. And then I think I built a template, and like the week later, you released the next version, and it had the template builder in it.
Yeah, the template builder. Yeah, because I know people were like.
Yeah, so those are two. I mean, it's fantastic to have all that features, and then the testers. Well, there's some pieces of code I cannot completely use a tester by itself, but I can use it with other modules. So it works out really well to test things. And actually, at the end of our presentation, I've got an example that I'll show when we talk about the little LabVIEW stories. So
okay. So anybody else wants to jump in? No.
Well, we're starting to use it and starting to actually specify it in our specifications. We actually hired Dan from Prime Test and we're making him do it in DQMH.
Okay, so
I was convinced by Jeff. I was actually convinced by Jeff.
I'm sitting here
because I was going back and forth on. I hired on with a new company back in September, left kind of consulting, and I had my wonderful architecture that I even had Fabiola review it.
Which is a good architecture.
And I said, should I go to DQMH? And she said, well, if you guys are all architects, this is great. This is a great architecture for architects. But where my current job or whatever, we don't have all our architects. We have a CLD to CLAD level people. And so I was like, I wanted to spend my time building perfect machines and not creating all this training material for how wonderful my architecture was. So Jeff told me about him transferring to DQMH and how successful he was with it and how he was able to get interns up to speed quickly. And I picked a lot of people's brains at NA Week and CLA Summit, and a lot of people just kept coming back with, oh yeah, we're going to transfer to DQMH because we have a team of various level people, and we're able to get people up and running with it. So all the way from the advanced users down to the CLD, CLAD level users are able to use it.
So basically, both Jeff and Mark have said there's the aspect of you want to have multiple tasks occur in parallel, different rates. You need multiple instances. You need to separate the GUI from the rest of the code. It can be used as standalone application. But then I think the one that I should put at the top of this list is the last one, because this is really the reason why people move to DQMH, is different levels of proficiency And the fact that you can take the same code from R&D to verification and validation to manufacturing to quality assurance. Because a lot of companies have smaller groups of LabVIEW developers, or have LabVIEW developers that work on silos, and they cannot work together, and it's really hard to change and share resources because they have different styles and they are used to using different things. With my husband, we joke because Luis keeps telling me, I'm not your target audience. And I'm like, you are my target audience, because he's R&D and he develops a PCB and creates the low-level driver just enough to get him through his test during R&D. But if he uses DQMH, by the time he passes the code to us, it's a lot easier to do cleanup of the API. But we don't have to be troubleshooting. We can communicate with the device, right? The right protocol, all the right delays, everything from the spec sheet and everything is already there because he already did that on R&D. So by the time we get to it, it's just cleaning it up, and it's a lot. It's a lot better when you get to do that. You really make good use of your resources across your company. So I think that's one of the reasons. The one that I'm starting to talk more about, because not a lot of people realize it, is the separating the GUI code from the rest of the code. These used to be, or the promise was that it could be done with X controls. And if you have tried X controls, you know how hard they are to troubleshoot. So by using a DQMH module to represent a control on the front panel of the DQMH module means that you can register to its events when you start the module, just like you would register for events for a control, and you insert it in a subpanel. So you could change that GUI. And this is especially good with like tables or any control in LabVIEW that requires a lot of GUI interaction. And that starts getting mixed with your business logic and what you're actually trying to do. So it allows you to do that. All right. So
hey, Fab, before you go on to a demo, we had a question. Someone was asking why this is good for beginners. And I can either let you, if you want to answer it, or I can
go,
try.
Jeff. Go for it.
So the reason I think it's good for beginners is probably the way I've come up with my method for having individuals and users use it. First off, being that it's DQMH, where it's QMH on steroids, which is probably the best way I like to explain it. So if you're familiar with QMH from all of NI's marketing and everything, you can fall into the DQMH a little easier. Where it becomes really good for beginners, especially if they're on a team. In our case, we have several developers, myself, and we have 2 others in my location, and we have 2 or 3 others down in Nogales, Mexico. When I develop something, I can go and develop a DAC driver or a signal generator driver or a spectrum analyzer, and I can make it simple enough where all the developer has to do that's using it can attach the module, essentially, which will be shown in a demonstration, how the modules kind of work together. But they can start a module that I've created, and if they want to do like set frequency, for example, it could just be as simple as like a VI that's set frequency, and they tell it the frequency and that's it. And they don't need to know all the Skippy commands. They don't need to know how it's connected to the system. They don't need to know all the inner workings of it. It's just a simple, here's this module you can use to do something. I've created a lot of modules that will do that for me. I have a basic data logging module. I have, spectrum analyzer, signal generator, working on a communication module, and all these different modules that if I make them easy enough to understand, somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience can go and use it. And then in the behind the scenes, I may have it set up with a bunch of classes so it'll work for like 5 different signal generators, and the developer doesn't care because all they have to tell it is, well, go to this frequency and go to this power, and I take care of all that in the background. So it makes it, for someone starting up, real easy to go ahead and create those complex designs, if you will, by using modules I've
I'll show you, if we have time, I'll show you the project template for the Delaware test sequencer, because that's a good example of something where we can create that and bring it to a group of different levels of proficiency. And there's an area that says, insert your code here. Right? So you can go and do, for those people that work with people that are casual LabVIEW developers that are used to only creating a single BI, and that's really all they need because they just need to acquire their data. Having something like that it still allows them to do their BI that they're used to, but the rest of the team can still use the code that they have done. One of the questions that I used to get a lot at the beginning was that, but doesn't that stifle creativity? And it's like, I don't need you to be creative on how to send the messages. I don't need you to be creative on how to start a module, stop a module, and do error reporting. That's the area I don't want spending time. Somebody already figured it out. Unless we're getting into a situation where we have to transmit to another, like TCP or whatever, and even then, you would go with George Hampel's generic DQMH network module. I don't want creativity there. I want creativity on how is it that we're going to ensure that the serial data acquired and the data that we are acquiring from these other sensors can be synchronized on the report that I'm generating. There, I need you to be as creative as you can be. But I don't want you to be creative on sending and stopping and starting and error handling. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right.
Hopefully that answered Donna's question about the beginners.
Yeah. Did that help, Donna? Yes or no?
Yes.
So